Welcome back to Ancient Echoes. Today we're traveling to the deserts of Egypt and Syria in the 3rd and 4th centuries CE, where men and women fled from the cities into the wilderness, seeking God in silence and solitude. They're called the Desert Fathers and Mothers, and their radical approach to spirituality would shape Christian mysticism for the next 2,000 years. Imagine the Roman Empire is collapsing. Christianity has just become legal after centuries of persecution. The church is becoming wealthy, powerful, and institutionalized. Bishops live in palaces. Theological debates rage about fine points of doctrine. Christianity is becoming comfortable, respectable, and conventional. And some people looked at this and thought, this isn't what Jesus taught. This isn't the radical, transformative path of the gospel. We've lost something essential. So they left. They walked out of the cities, away from the crowds, into the vast emptiness of the desert. They lived in caves, in abandoned tombs, in simple huts made of mud and reeds. They owned almost nothing. They ate almost nothing. They spoke almost nothing. And in that silence, that emptiness, that radical stripping away of everything comfortable and familiar, they encountered God. One of the first and most famous was Anthony of Egypt. Around 270 CE, at age 20, he heard the gospel passage. If you want to be perfect, go, sell what you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me. Anthony took it literally. He gave away his inheritance, left his family, and walked into the desert. He lived alone in an abandoned military fort for 20 years, battling what he called demons. Overwhelming temptations, terrifying visions, voices promising him power and pleasure if he would just give up and return to normal life. But Anthony persisted, and over those 20 years of solitude and silence, something transformed. The demons lost their power, the temptations faded. What remained was a profound peace, a clarity of mind, a direct experience of divine presence. When he finally emerged from his isolation, people were astonished. He looked younger, healthier, and more radiant than when he left. His eyes were clear, his presence was powerful. Word spread, and soon thousands were streaming into the desert, seeking the same transformation. The Desert Fathers and Mothers developed a set of practices that we would now call contemplative spirituality. At the center was Hesychasm, the practice of inner stillness and silence. They would sit in their cells for hours, days, sometimes weeks, practicing what they called guarding the heart, maintaining pure attention on the presence of God, letting go of every thought, every image, every concept that arose. One of the most famous practices was the Jesus Prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. They would repeat this prayer continuously, hundreds or thousands of times a day, until the words dissolved and only the awareness of divine presence remained. This is remarkably similar to the Sufi practice of dhikr that we explored with Rumi, and to Buddhist mantra practice. Across traditions, mystics have discovered that repetitive prayer or mantra can be a doorway to silence, to stillness, to direct encounter with the sacred. Abba Arsenius, one of the Desert Fathers, was once a tutor to the emperor's children in Rome. He had wealth, status, education, and access to power. But he felt empty inside, disconnected from God despite all his religious knowledge. So he prayed, Lord, lead me in the way of salvation. And he heard a voice, Arsenius, flee from men and you will be saved. He left everything and went to the desert. But even there he still felt unsettled. So he prayed again, Lord, lead me in the way of salvation. And the voice said, Arsenius, flee, be silent, be still. These are the roots of sinlessness. Flee, be silent, be still. This isn't about running away from responsibility or avoiding the world. It's about fleeing from the constant noise, the endless distractions, the addiction to busyness and stimulation that keeps us from encountering ourselves, encountering God, encountering reality as it is. Abba Arsenius spent the rest of his life in the desert, speaking very rarely, maintaining profound silence and stillness. When people sought him out for advice, he often wouldn't speak at all. Sometimes he would just weep. His tears said more than words could. The Desert Fathers had a concept called Apophatic theology, the way of negation. Instead of describing what God is, they described what God is not. God is not a thing. God is not an object. God is not anything the mind can grasp or conceptualize. This led them to a radical form of prayer that involved letting go of all thoughts, all images, all concepts about God. Even the word God had to be released. What remained was pure silence, pure presence, pure being. Abba Isaac said, "Someone who wishes to see the Lord within himself strives to purify his heart through ceaseless remembrance of God, so that his intellect, ascending above all created things, might dwell in stillness and profound peace." Notice, above all created things. Even your mental concepts of God are created things. Even your theological ideas are created things. To encounter the uncreated, the source, you have to let go of everything created, including your thoughts about God. This is the apophatic way, the way of unknowing, the cloud of unknowing, the dark night of the soul. You strip away everything you think you know until only the naked truth remains. Amma Syncletica, one of the Desert Mothers, taught, "In the beginning there is struggle and a lot of work for those who come near to God. But after that there is indescribable joy. It is just like building a fire. At first it's smoky and your eyes water, but later you get the desired result. Thus we ought to light the divine fire in ourselves with tears and effort. The path isn't easy. Sitting in silence, you confront everything you've been running from your whole life. Your fears, your shame, your rage, your grief. All the thoughts and feelings you've been distracting yourself from rise to the surface. The Desert Fathers called these logismoi, thoughts that disturb the peace of the heart. They identified 8 main categories: gluttony, lust, greed, anger, sadness, acedia, kind of listless apathy, vainglory, and pride. These later became the 7 deadly sins in Catholic theology. But for the Desert Fathers, they weren't moral failures to feel guilty about. They were simply obstacles to be observed, understood, and transcended through awareness and grace. The practice was simple. When a disturbing thought arose, you didn't engage with it, didn't fight it, didn't believe it. You simply observed it, recognized it for what it was, and let it pass, like clouds passing through the sky of awareness. Abba Pullman said, "Teach your mouth to say what is in your heart." And then he added, "Teach your heart to guard what your tongue teaches." There's a beautiful circularity here. Speak what is true, then live what you speak, then speak what you live. Truth spoken and embodied, continuously refining itself. The Desert Fathers and Mothers lived with extraordinary simplicity. They owned almost nothing, maybe a mat to sleep on, a cloak, a few tools for weaving baskets which they would sell to buy minimal food. They ate once a day, usually just bread and salt, sometimes with a few vegetables or dates. This wasn't masochism or punishment, it was freedom. Every possession is something to maintain, protect, worry about. Every comfort is something you can become attached to. By owning nothing, they were free from the tyranny of things. Abba Antony said, "I saw all the snares of the enemy spread out across the world, and I said, groaning, 'What can get through such snares?' Then I heard a voice saying to me, 'Humility, humility, not thinking you're worthless, but having a clear, honest assessment of yourself without inflation or deflation, seeing yourself as you actually are, without the distortions of pride or shame. This humility comes naturally from silence and solitude. When you're alone in the desert with just yourself and God, there's no one to impress, no one to perform for, no one whose validation you're seeking. The masks fall away. You see yourself clearly. And in that clear seeing, paradoxically, you find God. Because God isn't something separate from your true nature. God is what's there when all the false layers are stripped away. Abba Lot came to Abba Joseph and said, "Father, according to my strength, I keep a moderate rule of prayer and fasting and reading and silence, and according to my strength, I purify my thoughts. What more must I do?" Abba Joseph stood up and stretched out his hands toward heaven, and his fingers became like 10 lamps of fire. And he said, "If you will, you can become all flame." This is the promise of the contemplative path. Not just a little improvement, not just better behavior, but complete transformation. Becoming fire itself, becoming light itself, becoming love itself. Here's a practice from the desert tradition that you can do right now, wherever you are. Find a quiet place. Sit comfortably. Close your eyes or lower your gaze. Begin to repeat silently, in rhythm with your breath, "Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me." If you're not Christian, you can use another phrase, "God grant me peace," or Om Shanti, or simply peace, or here, or now. The words don't matter as much as the practice of returning again and again to this one simple prayer, this one point of focus. Every time your mind wanders, and it will wander constantly, gently bring it back. No judgment, no frustration, just return. Do this for 10 minutes. Notice what happens. Notice what arises in the silence between the words. Notice the quality of awareness that begins to emerge when the mind settles. The Desert Fathers and Mothers knew something that we've forgotten in our age of constant noise and stimulation. Silence is not empty. Silence is not empty. Silence is full. In silence, you encounter what has always been there beneath the noise, the still small voice, the divine presence, your own true nature. Abba Moses said to someone who came seeking advice, "Go sit in your cell, and your cell will teach you everything." Your cell, whether it's an actual room or the metaphorical cell of solitude and silence, becomes your teacher. Not because you're learning new information, but because in silence you unlearn all the false ideas that have been covering up the truth. The desert tradition reminds us that sometimes the path to God runs through emptiness. Sometimes you have to let go of everything, comforts, distractions, even religious consolations, to encounter the naked reality of the divine. Over the next week, practice silence. Even if you can't go to the desert, you can create a cell in your own life. Turn off your phone for an hour. Sit in a quiet room. Resist the urge to fill the silence with music or podcasts or thoughts. Just be silent. Be still. Let the noise settle like mud in water. See what's there when the water becomes clear. And if you find the practice of repeating a simple prayer helpful, do it. Not to earn God's favor, but to quiet your mind, to focus your attention, to create space for encounter with the sacred. In our next episode, our final one in this series, we'll integrate all these teachings and explore how to live ancient wisdom in your modern life. Until then, flee the noise. Be silent. Be still. These are the roots of peace. The Desert Fathers are still teaching from their caves. Are you ready to listen?